Hello and welcome back to a new episode of Code Savvy. So today we'll be learning to install n8n locally. That is what this episode is all about. Now there's a very strong reason on why I wanted to do this episode. So in future, very shortly, I am planning to do some episodes on creating agents and different workflows using these agents on n8n. And by the way, I'm told that it is supposed to be pronounced Nathan. I'm not sure. So I'll try to pronounce it Nathan, right? But you can call it whatever you want, whatever floats your boat, essentially. So this is what we are planning to do. Learn to host a Nathan locally. And if you already know how to host it locally, feel free to skip this video. Or if you're using the cloud version, you don't need this essentially. But this is for those who are actually interested in self-hosting a Nathan and save some money, right? So without much ado, let's get right into it. Let us quickly brush up on what a Nathan is all about. So Nathan is an open source workflow, and how I would like to think about it is it's a sort of agentic workflow. By agentic, I mean, of course, AI agentic workflow, which automates your tasks. And we will be seeing some examples in later videos. And the key characteristics are it has a visual interface, so you can create workflows using nodes. It is a fair code implementation, which essentially means that the source code is available and it is self-hostable and it is accessible. So it's designed for both non-coders and developers. It essentially ticks both the boxes. It is no code and low code, so it's built visually, or you can add custom scripts. It has extensive integration, so it supports over 500 apps, which includes database, SaaS APIs, cloud, and of course AI agents, which you can integrate with this flow. So it has a self-hosting option, which is what this episode is all about. So you can host your own servers for data privacy if you so chose. And it has a very flexible AI integration. So it has native supports for large language models and AI agents. How n8n works, and we will be seeing examples of this later, is it has some trigger nodes which starts workflows. It has action nodes which perform tasks. It has conditional logic which you can build into the workflows. And then, of course, it has data processing, which essentially you can transform, filter, and enrich your data flows. Where all can you use Nathan? So you can use it in data integration, whereby you can connect apps and streamline data flow. You can use it in marketing automation. So you can use it to send essentially email campaigns and social posts. You can use to create those. It can be used in IT and DevOps for server monitoring and automated deployments. It's very much capable of doing that. It can be used for AI and machine learning, and it can be used for web scraping. So in short, it provides a very powerful self-hostable platform for automating complex processes. That is what you should keep in mind. It is used for automating complex processes. It makes it very simple. I am on the home page of Nathan. So if you open your browser window and go to https://n8n.io, it will bring you to this home page. And by the way, don't worry, I'll be sharing all these links that I showed today in the video description below, so you can just go and check it out. So once you're on the home page, if you click on pricing, it will give you a fair idea on how much it will cost you if you were to go for the paid version. So for example, if you go for the starter kit or the starter plan, it would cost you 20 euros per month, which is billed annually. So you would probably need to pay around 240 euros upfront. And if you go for the pro version, it's even more costlier. You have the business version, more costlier, and you have the enterprise version, which they do not want to mention the pricing on. But remember, they have given us the option to self-host it. So we, being brilliant developers and architects, we can easily do that. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. Now, to go to the official documentation on how you can self-host Nathan, what you need to do is you need to go to the top banner here, click on the docs drop down and go to self-host n8n. So this link right here, right? And this will bring you to the self-hosting n8n page. And what this essentially gives you is a couple of options on how you can do it. So it gives you an option with via npm or via docker. We'll be seeing both these options one by one. If you do not have docker installed, the page very kindly points out how you can install docker. So if you just click on this link here, the docker installation guide, it details what all you need to know on installing docker on your system. And it would essentially bring you to the Docker's official page where you can choose your operating system, be it Windows, Linux, Mac OS, whatever it is, and just follow the instructions to install Docker. Now, Nathan recommends using Docker because essentially it will be a self-contained container and it provides a clean and isolated environment. So right here they say that. So, and it avoids operating system and tooling incompatibilities, which is what Docker containers are all about, isn't it? So this is what they recommend, and they also say that you can use it with Docker Compose. If you use Docker to self-host Nathan, I would actually recommend using Docker Compose because it gives you a lot more flexibility in the way you can define your services. We'll be seeing examples of this shortly. And of course, the other method is using Node.js packages. So you can use npm to install this, and there is a constraint whereby you can only use Node.js version between 20.19 and 24.x. So make sure that you have this this version installed in your system, because if you install, say, the latest, which is 25, I believe, 25 point something, it won't work. Or if it is or if you have a very old npm version, say 17 or 18, again it won't work. So it has to be between 20.19 and 24.x. So make sure you install the correct version. Let us first start with how we can install it using Docker Desktop. Assuming you have successfully installed Docker Desktop and you have launched it, what you need to do is you need to go into the images tab on the left hand side, click on it, and then do a image search for n8 or Nathan. I keep forgetting the correct pronunciation, right? And this will bring you to the official image. So click on that and just do a pull. Don't do a run, do a pull. Okay, because we need to set up some configuration and environment variables before we do a run, and wait for it to be pulled from the Docker registry. If you click on it, you can see the progress, how much time is remaining for it to be pulled completely. Okay, so let us give it some time. So once your pull is completed, you will see the images n8n io slash n8n column latest. What you now need to do is you need to go and click on the run tab here, right? And as soon as you click on it, a window will pop up with optional settings. You need to click on the drop down, and this is where we'll be defining our various configuration and environment variables. The port will of course be 5678. This is the default port. Let us use it, but if you want to use any other port, so be it. I'm going to use 5678. The next thing what we want to define is the volumes. So volumes is where the Nathan data will be stored in your local system. So you need to define some volumes there. The host path would be something that belongs to your local directory. So let me give something within my, so I'm using a Windows OS, by the way, and this is my D drive, and within D drive I am defining a folder. So it is essentially a directory structure I'm defining on where I want my Nathan data. So I have defined this folder. So you can choose whatever directory you want it and define it similarly. If you're using another operating system, just do a Google search. It would give you how you can define your directory paths there. And the container path is where you want this volume to be mapped, right? So this is the container path, and where do you want this to be mapped inside the container? So just give slash home slash node slash dot n8n. This would be the container path, essentially the path inside your n8n container, which will be mapped to your local volume. Now you would need to define some environment variables. So the first thing you would need to define is your webhook URL, which is essentially how you would like external applications to talk to your application there. Now let us give this a value, right? So this essentially would be the URL which will be accessible to your external apps. Now, by default, this will not be accessible because this is within a container. And in later sessions, I will show you how you can actually define a webhook URL which external applications, that is applications running outside your system or on the internet, can access your n8n instance. But for the time being, just go with the flow. Just give http colon slash slash localhost colon 5678. This will work for your internal applications, that is applications within your Docker container or other services that you have enabled within Docker. Okay. Similarly, if you want to add more environment variables, for example, if you wanted to add something like enable community nodes, which is essentially nodes which are not official n8n nodes, but nodes that are defined by community enthusiasts of n8n, right? So if you wanted access to those, what you need to do is you just need to define the variable n8n underscore community underscore packages underscore enabled and give it a value of true, right? So let us use all small cases here. Okay. And if you wanted, you could define more environment variables as you please, but we're not going to do that. By the way, I will be discussing about community packages on how you can install a node using community packages in later sessions. So keep an eye out for that. And once you're done with all your configurations and setup of environment variables, just do a run. This should start up your container. And you can see the logs, right? And it says the editor is now accessible via localhost 5678, which is the port that we defined. So if you click on this, this will now bring you to the login page, essentially where you can set up your account. So if you already have an account in n8n, you can use those credentials, or if not, just create new ones. Now I will pause this video and I'll enter my credentials. So for in your case, if you're doing it for the first time, enter your email, your first name, your last name, and the password that you want, and click on the next. It will show you a couple of more screens whereby they will ask you some questions like from where did you hear about n8n, or what do you do. So those are optional questions which you can skip. So I'm not going through those screens there. But essentially, in the end, you will get to this page here, whereby they will say to get paid features for free forever. They will send your activation key if you provide your email again. So essentially, what you need to do is you need to provide your email here to receive your license key. So enter it and just click on send me a free license key, and then go into your inbox and pick up that key. Click on next, and this will bring you to the to your home page. Essentially, this is called the canvas. So this is where your workflows, this is where you'll be defining your workflows. Now, if you have got your activation key in your inbox, just copy paste it, and the place where you would actually enter it is go to your name icon, which is on the bottom left hand corner. Click on it, go to settings, okay, and then click on enter activation key. Right, so click on this pane here and just copy paste the key that was sent in your email address that you provided, and just click activate, and you should see a message saying that your flow has been activated. Now, to make sure that this is working, you just click from scratch. This will bring you to your canvas, and then you can just click on add a new step. You can search for any node that you want. Say you want a chat trigger node. We'll be discussing these things later. So this will bring you to your chat trigger node configuration. Go back to canvas. You should see your trigger node. You can add more nodes like AI. You can add an AI agent to it, which will bring you to the AI agent configuration page. So you can see this is already joined. If you wanted, you can remove this link. You can play around. You can add more nodes. You can add a chat model, and you can do a lot of things. Essentially, these are things that I'll be covering in later sessions. Okay, but the scope of this session is getting your self-hosted n8n instance up and running, and this is the first method by which you can do it, which is essentially using Docker desktop. The next method that we'll be seeing is actually using Docker Compose. So let's see how we can do that. Now, Docker Compose does not need any additional installation if you already have Docker Desktop, because it comes prepackaged with Docker Desktop. So if you look into the Docker documentation here, this is what it says. Docker Desktop includes Docker Compose along with Docker Engine and Docker CLI, which are Compose prerequisites. So essentially, if you have Docker desktop and if you were following along, you should already have Docker Compose there. So I'm back on the official page of n8n for Docker installation, and here you can see that they have essentially given a link to some Docker Compose samples. So this sentence here, right? You can find Docker Compose configuration for various architectures in the n8n hosting repo. And if you click on this link, it should take you to the GitHub repo. There you are. And if you go within Docker Compose, right, you can find different samples. So let us, for example, take a sample with Postgres, and you click on docker-compose.yaml. So this is the file you would need to recreate in your local system in order to enable n8n to be up and running using Docker Compose. So I'm just clicking on this, and here you can see the actual configuration. So they are using the Postgres service and the n8n service, and you can see the image for the n8n is from docker.n8.io, n8nio n8n, and then the Postgres image is Postgres 16, which I believe is the latest one. Option for restart has been given as always. You can specify your environment variables for each of the services, such as user, password, whether it's a non-root user, etc., etc. And then you can essentially give a health check. Essentially, you can give a test command to make sure that the Postgres is up and running. You can specify the interval, the timeout, the retries, and in the n8n service, what you do is you actually define that this service depends on Postgres, and the condition for the dependency is that this Postgres service should be healthy. Why we need this configuration, in case you're wondering, is because n8n needs a database. Now, in non-prod environments, in development environments, by default, it uses SQLite. But if you are using a prod environment, so essentially, if you are in production, what n8n recommends you do is that you use the Postgres database. Now, why do you need a database? Essentially, you need a database to store all your flows, your configurations, your different variables. So you need a database essentially, and this is the database that n8n recommends that you use. You use Postgres, right? And why you define depends on the n8n service is because you have to ensure that your Postgres service is up and running before the n8n service starts running. Otherwise, it will not load. So by giving these three lines here, it ensures that the n8n service will only be up and running after the Postgres service has started. Okay, so if you think about it logically, it makes sense. If A depends on B, it essentially means that B should be up and running before A can be up and running. So that is what is happening here. So you can copy and paste that Docker Compose sample that you saw, and you can create your own Docker Compose. Now that is exactly what I've done, though with some alterations. So that is the beauty of Docker Compose. It is very flexible. It allows you to define the services the way you want it. So if you notice here, I've defined the n8n service. Towards the beginning, I have defined some environment variables. I've defined the volume. I've also defined a network. Okay, and the same network I'm using in Postgres. Do you need the network? So normally you wouldn't need to define the network. You would need the network only and only if, say, one service wants to access the resources of another service. Now, in this case, it doesn't need it because essentially we're telling n8n to just use the Postgres database. It is a database. But suppose you have another service in your Docker Compose, something like Waha API, which will be a session later, by the way. So watch out for it. So say you're using Waha container as a service within this Docker Compose here, and you want to send some images to n8n. How do you do that? So those documents, those image files will be stored in the Waha container. So within a volume inside the Waha container, and your n8n container needs to access that. So in such cases, you would need to define a common network which both these services, your Waha service and your n8n service, can access. And so essentially that's why you need networks. But don't worry about this for now. If you want, you could just remove it. We will definitely be seeing this in future sessions again. Okay, and essentially I'll be sharing this file with you in case you want to play around. Now to execute Docker Compose, what you need to do is you need to go into the folder where you have defined a docker-compose.yml file. So if you're not done that, just create a file, copy and paste the contents from wherever you want, either the sample file I have provided or from n8n's official GitHub sample repo. And all you need to do is once you're inside that folder, right, you just need to type in Docker Compose up. That's it. Since I've already downloaded the image earlier for Docker Desktop, that part is quite fast, and you can see it is downloading the other necessary details that it wants, and it now says that the n8n task broker is ready on 127 and the editor is accessible via 5678. If you're doing this for the first time, okay, this will take some time because it essentially needs to download the image and then run it, right? Since I've already downloaded the image and it is available in my local system, this was quite fast. It took maybe under a minute for it to be up and running. And the way I access it is the same. I could just click on this link, yeah, and it essentially takes me to the same screen and setup that we saw previously with the Docker desktop. So just follow those steps, just repeat those steps essentially. Okay, so just go to the Docker desktop part maybe 5 minutes back and just see how I configured or I set up n8n. So it is essentially the same steps. And with that, we are done with Docker Compose. The next one that we'll be seeing is how can we set this up? How can we set up n8n with npm? So let's get into that. Back on the official n8n installation, self-hosting installation page, and if you go to npm, the npm link, it is quite comprehensive on what you're actually required to do. Now make sure, as I mentioned before, that you have Node.js between 20.19 and 24.x installed. It should not be lesser, it should not be greater. It won't work. Now, if you're on Windows, okay, what I found very helpful is that you can manage your Node.js versions using NVM. So essentially, NVM is the Node version manager, and it is written in Go. And this is the official GitHub repo for NVM. What it allows you to do is it allows you to install a certain version of NVM. You can install multiple versions actually, and it allows you to switch between the versions. Now this is very useful, right? So if you're using something like n8n, which wants specific versions, but say you're working on some other application which requires a version which is either outside the allowed range for n8n, uh, each time you would be stuck in a loop where you're installing, uninstalling, reinstalling. Instead of that, you can manage that using NVM. So you can switch between the versions. So just download the executable file here, and once you download it, you can just say something like nvm install 25, which will install the version 25, and then you can say nvm use 25, and then you can start using nvm 25. So if you say you wanted to switch back to 24 while using n8n, or say version 23, you could just say nvm install 23 or 24, and then you could say nvm use 23 or 24, and it would work. Okay, I'll give the description, I'll provide this link in the description below, so just check out check that out. Once you have installed node.js, the required version, once you're done with the installation of node.js, come back to the npm installation page for n8n, the official page, and just run this commands. So I am on the Windows system, and I ran this commands using PowerShell. So I'm not going to run this again since I've already installed it, but this is fairly simple. You just copy paste these commands into PowerShell. Preferably go into PowerShell as an admin. If you are on a Linux or a Mac, go in as a root or admin user and run these commands there, and that should install the latest version there. If you want a specific version of n8n to be available, this is a command that you need to run. So for example, if you wanted 0.1 to 6.1, this is a command you would be using. Okay, I would not be using something like n8n at next, but because essentially this is a beta version which is unstable, so either go for a specific version or just install the default version, which should be the latest stable version there, right? And after installation, all you need to do to start running is you just need to either type do n8n on the command prompt or n8n start. So let me start PowerShell as an administrator. Okay, and let me show you what I mean. So within PowerShell, I'll just type in n8n on n8n. Always get that wrong, isn't it? n8n start, right? And this will launch my n8n instance. You can see, just ignore the warnings, and I can just say O to open, and it will essentially open localhost 5678 on port 5678, right? So this is one way of doing it. Now, the obvious question you might have is, how do I provide environment variable? So this is what the warning is all about. That you might have noticed this, right, when I launched it, and I said just ignore it. Why I got this warning is because I have launched this before. So I usually use npm to launch my n8n instances, and I have provided these variables before. And essentially what it's saying now is that I've not got these variables. Are you sure you want to launch it this way? So what, in order to provide those variables, what I'll do is I'll just close this instance. So I'll just do a, and this is how I'll provide my environment variable. So I can just specify $env colon, and I can just provide the environment variables. If I want to provide more than one environment variables, for example, my first environment variable that I've provided here is that I do not want to block environment access in the node. So I set it as false. The second environment variable that I provided is I want the runners to be enabled, just set as true. I do not want Git node bare repos. Okay, so it's essentially disabled bare repos. I want the community packages enabled. I want Postgres DB, the pool size to be 2. I want the SQLite pool size to be 2. And I'll just, after all that, I'll just do colon n8n start, which was the original command that we started with. We'll discuss the tunnel part later, so you can see it being grayed out. So we will do this in a later session, I promise. Okay, so let me hit enter, and this should launch the n8n instance, right? And now you can see, right, the warnings have disappeared, because essentially now it is happy that I provided it with the environment variables which I had previously provided it. Okay, now just me open it in the browser. So I just press O and it will open the browser, and there you are, right? So since this will just give me my saved passwords, and because this is a global instance, remember, so this is something that I've installed globally. I'm regularly using it, so it knows my password. It has taken it from the cache, so it knows my credentials, my username and password, right? And I think with that we are almost at the end of our session, right? So we discussed three ways of doing of hosting self-hosted n8n instances, right? So we did a Docker desktop, which was the first method we saw. We used Docker Compose, which was the second, and then we saw how we can use Node.js. Now, before we end, I think it's a fair question whether I have any personal preferences on which method I would use. So, as I did mention maybe a couple of minutes ago, my personal preference would be using npm, and the only reason I prefer using npm is because it essentially installs the n8n instance globally on my system, right? So essentially, I can open any folder, I can go into any directory, and I can just launch n8n, and all my previous configurations, all my previous workflows that I created would be there. So it would be accessible since I have installed it globally. And that is the only reason I would prefer n8n. If I use something like Docker Compose, I could still access my previous workflows, my configurations, but the only condition being that I launch it again from the same container or the same folder that I used previously, because that is where all the Docker configuration would be stored. It would be stored within that particular directory. So if I'm using a new directory or new folder, and I'm using a Docker Compose, even if I'm using the same Docker Compose, which I need to copy over to the new directory there, and if I launch my n8n instance from there, it would be a brand new instance. It would not know of my previous workflows, which can be a little bit annoying, because essentially what you would then need to do is you need to go back to your previous workflows, your previous instance, and launch it from there, then copy it across to the new instance, or you could copy the directory across, in which case you might run into some errors. So that can be a bit frustrating there, right? I would not prefer using Docker desktop, because each time you try to run it afresh, you would have to specify the configuration variables over and over again, which is really annoying. Okay, so my personal preferences, yes, it is npm using node Node.js. Now, before I end this session, my next session would be on exposing our innate instances to the outside world, to the internet. Because remember, what we have done now, okay, is we have managed to self-host our n8n instances. So essentially, any services within our local host can access n8n instance. But if the service, if it's an external service, that's it, it is via internet that you want to access, say, WhatsApp or Messenger or Twitter or X wants to access your native instance, it cannot do it, right? Because either it's running in your local system or within a container inside your local system, and that is the boundary, right, which your system's firewall will not allow any outsider to come through unless it has a pathway, which is essentially what a tunnel does. Now, this is something we will see in the next session. But for the time being, I hope you learned something valuable from this session. So, till we meet again, adios.